Welcome to BTFDtv. My name's Jack, and I have with me the round table, and we have a special guest who will be dropping in the coming minutes. So until that happens, let me go to Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob, are you with us?
I am.
How is DC treating you? Your thoughts today?
Well, DC would have been very, very quiet this week, but for David.
Gregory getting his ass canned and giving a $4 million exit.
The handwriting was on the wall with that, but I guess much to the dismay of my Twitter followers, I really didn't hammer on him. It's never good to kick a dog when they're down. So he's gone. I thought he did a lousy job, ruined a tremendous franchise, or partially destroyed a tremendous franchise. But the big story coming out of DC this week really related to Obama and on a bunch of different fronts.
Welcome. Our guest has joined us from Ireland. If you'll give us about 30 seconds to 1 minute, we will be cycling to you. Right now we're covering the opening sequence of what's going on in DC.
Anyway, so...
Are you live, Joe?
Well, we're live.
We're live. We're on air.
That's okay.
Yes.
We just do a little U.S. political fix at the beginning. Anyway, Obama, there was much dismay over an Atlantic article that Jonah Goldberg wrote that was put out by Hillary, where she basically called his policy ineffectual. For those who don't know, the stories of the internal machinations of the Obama White House it was quite clear that most of the president's people supported action in Syria. He did not. He overruled them. So it wasn't much of a surprise there. What has been, dominated the calendar, but for what's going on in Ferguson, Missouri, has been, Obama's perceived fecklessness, and I have to agree. Just one other quick thing. There's not much to mention on the political front otherwise, but just to let you know, not only does Eric Holder, our Attorney General, have representatives in Ferguson, Missouri, but rest assured, Rasputin is on site, so everything will be solved within days. Yes, exactly. So with that, I'll pass it along.
All right. So in very real quick terms, this show is going to be a bit interesting. Where I'm the hippie on the show, and I'm probably the most conservative on our list. We actually have a dueling battle for how far left we can get on this lineup. So on that note, I want you guys to know that I'm playing devil's advocate against all of you, and I'm outnumbered. So welcome to the show. It's taken us about 2 years of you and I trying to make this happen. So I want to thank you for joining us. Please introduce yourself, give a little background about yourself, your background, and where you're working currently today.
Me?
Yes, you're live.
Yeah, you didn't address me. Sorry. My name is Brian McDonald. Currently, I'm a columnist with Russia Today, RT in Moscow. I live in Ireland, in a city called Kilkenny in the southeast. I previously worked for the Daily Mail in London and the Irish Independent in Dublin, among a few others. I also lived in Berlin for a few years. I speak Irish, English, Russian, and German. And good to be here, Jack. Nice to see you. And it's approximately
midnight.
Whoa, my trusty Rado says it's 5 past midnight here in Kilkenny. Yeah. So there you go.
Welcome and thank you for the.
And by the way, I'm not a liberal, by the way.
Oh.
I'll tell you that.
All right.
No.
All right.
But then again, you see, what we call a conservative, you guys call a liberal, because your conservatives are somewhere to the right of to the right of Goebbels. It's. I remember being in America, in Los Angeles, and somebody said the Democrat Party are kind of like socialists, or they're kind of like liberals. And I said in Great Britain or in Germany that they'd be considered to be the far right, And this American guy said, what would you call the Republican Party? And I said, I don't know. I said, like, Genghis Khan, It's kind of like,
Genghis
So
Khan
I
had
don't know.
good social
Anyway, thanks.
program.
Good to have you. He
Welcome.
did, but
A quick.
the Russians they found him.
All right.
I lost him already.
I missed that one.
Sorry.
No worries. Captain Jim, welcome back. How is Cancun treating you today?
Cancun. Okay.
He's in the Cayman Islands, folks.
Yeah.
He's in the Cayman Islands. I'm just being a smart ass.
The Cayman Islands are awesome. Friendliest place in the world. Can't beat it.
Very good. I'm glad you're back. How's the boat?
Good. Good. We were over by the sandbar Stingray City yesterday and ran into a black-tip reef shark. Scared a lot of tourists. It's great fun.
Right on.
What's the tax rate in the Cayman Islands?
Let me think. It's 0.
No. What is the tax rate though? Really?
No property tax, no income tax, no tax.
No sales tax?
What do you think
No
tax rate is? What do you think tax rate is in the Irish Republic?
You know, I block those things out. I'm used to 0 now. What is it in the 20s, 18? What is it?
53% effective tax rate.
50%.
53.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to justify, even as a liberal, and I think I was it's hard to justify taking more than half of the money that somebody earns.
Yeah,
but I'm sure they're spending it on really good stuff. The government probably, you guys probably have roads that align with gold, and everything's really
They
awesome,
do have
right?
roads, right? We were talking about this last night. You do have good roads.
Yeah, and we've got trains, and we've got public buses and stuff like that, and trams. We also pay people who don't work €200 a week for doing nothing.
We pay people who don't work the price of a ticket to go home.
Yeah, I know, but like if you consider Europe at the moment, I mean, that's more than the average salary in the majority of the European Union,
Inconceivable.
So are you importing Ukrainians?
No, we're doing our best to keep them out, actually, at the moment. Slava Russia.
Я понимаю, что ты сказал. Got some Russian there.
There was a bit of Russian. All right, so warning is there's people married to Russians on this. There's multiple people married to Russians on this show.
Actually, I'll just say to you one. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, technically, I mean, she was born in what was the Soviet Union and what's now part of the Ukraine, and being Jewish, she could care less who kills who.
I did read on TripAdvisor this morning that foreign tourists have voted the most attractive women, Russians, and the most attractive men, Irish. So I've decided that the best thing the Irish and Russians can do now is get together and sort of create super babies, This is my,
so when is your child due? August? September?
In about 3 weeks.
Huh?
In about 3 weeks.
3 weeks. All right.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that. So guys, let's take some serious topics now. Now that we've done the green room for a few minutes into the show, what are your thoughts, first of all, on the we'll call it, from the Western's point of view, the Trojan horse convoy. From another perspective, the resupply of eastern Ukraine. And the implications that it's been parked for literally days now, and with the as I understand it, the Red Cross attempting to act as a process filter to get the supplies to people who obviously do need it. If no power, no water, no food, and a war zone going on, those people are definitely in need of supplies from wherever they arrive, right? So looking at that perspective, do we expect that the peace convoy, we'll call it that, the Trojan horse from the West perspective, do we expect it to actually arrive in the near future? Do we think that there's going to be a change towards any peaceful cross sharing.
I think
I
what
mean-
happened.
I'm
Sorry.
No, I mean, Jack. Practically speaking, I don't believe so. I think that the last verifiable information I had was that the last two groups of separatists were essentially being surrounded by Ukrainian military personnel, and that led to Putin being basically forced to make some type of move. Now, there were lots of reports of Russian excursions into Ukraine. I don't know whether any of that panned out. I didn't see a lot of that in the quote-unquote standard press, just again reports. So I think that the situation is befuddling, although I'll note that the U.S. futures markets, which are open, are paying it no mind.
For someone who's been there lately, someone who's covering the topic, and obviously someone who is speaking employed from one side of this.
I'm not employed by them, by the way. It's a mere portion of my income. So
yes, I understood.
Okay.
What are your thoughts about the convoy? Does it make it across? Is it going to be accepted? Is it going to be where does it, in form of chess? I would say this appears to be a major piece that's in play, but it hasn't been defined how it's going to be in play yet. Thoughts on that?
Okay, well, firstly, I've got a bit of an advantage here because I've actually got a friend in Lugansk at the moment, and I
That's
spoke
why
to him
you're on the show.
Yeah, a very crazy British guy called Graham, who is kind of famous on Twitter these days. He's in Lugansk. He denies that the Ukrainian army are anywhere near the city center at the moment, contrary to reports. Now, when I spoke to him, I didn't hear fireworks going off in the background, so I presume he's right. And also, he is wanted by the Ukrainian state, so I doubt he'd be hanging around if they were, in the ascendancy, so to speak. There, I would say though that yeah, okay, it's like a sort of sorry, I just got a message. Yeah, it's I would say to you that about the convoy, which is your actual question, Jack, that
yeah,
the humanitarian convoy is needed. There's no doubt about that.
Agreed.
The question, though, is that why are Ukraine not doing it themselves if they're making such massive advances as they claim to be? I mean, it's not a huge amount of money. I suppose $1 million would cover a massive convoy, more than enough to keep the place going for a little while. Russia apparently has something like 90 trucks in it, I think, or something. So
how many? 200 plus trucks, 280.
Yeah, well, 90 sitting at the border and others
right.
behind. But I mean, I guess, $20,000 would fill a truck. So one would question why Ukraine can't do this themselves. I mean, we have to remember that Ukraine is a poor country, but 50 to 100 individuals in the country are vastly rich and much wealthier than any of us here, and much wealthier than most people in even Los Angeles or San Francisco. I mean, the richest man in Ukraine, Rinat Akhmatov, has a fortune of $19 billion US. To put it into context, the richest man in the United Kingdom, Jared Grosvenor, the Duke of Westminster, has $11 billion. And this is a fortune that's been built up over 200 years through aristocrats and blah, blah, blah. I mean, Akhmetov has made this money in less than 20 years. To put it also into context, Ukraine's economy is smaller than the Republic of Ireland, despite the fact that we've only got 5 million people and they got 45 million people, okay? Our richest man, a guy called Dennis O'Brien, has only got about $2 billion. Their richest man has got $19 billion. They've got 9 Forbes billionaires. We have 3. Now, that just shows you how big the gap is between rich and poor in Ukraine. 85% of the economy is controlled by less than 50 people. Now, these guys who are benefiting from this war, because if the Ukrainian side, which I presume they will, do win this war, I mean, they will be liberating the economic interests of Rinat Akhmatov, whose fortune is largely based in the Donetsk region. Now, the point is that why can't these guys fund the war? I mean, why does Russia have to bring aid in the first place? Why does Great Britain have to give them £1 billion sterling?
I was going to bring that up. Britain right now is bringing up it's funding the Ukraine, right? That
Yeah,
it
£1
was,
billion.
Why?
Well, I could say uncharitably that because America told them to, look, whatever the reasons are, I don't know. I suppose they see it as God's work or solidarity or something. I don't know, but the fact about the matter is that we've got a guy called at the moment Igor Holomoisky, who's also Jewish, by the way, to our friend there, who's got the Ukrainian Jewish wife, and this guy, Exwal, this guy is, he's got a private militia, numbered between 2,000 and 20,000 soldiers, depending on who you believe. He is rewarding them with $10,000 each for every rebel or separatist, or whatever you want to call them, that they capture. Now, the last time in Europe a guy was running around with a private army with 2,000 men in it or more was in Berlin in the 1930s, and I think we all know what happened there, Now, I hate using the Nazi analogy. I'm not going to use it because we can call everybody Nazis and then we just get into a big argument. But it is deeply worrying that with all this money in Ukraine, that first of all, they're looking for money to begin with from the United Kingdom or Germany or America or any other country. And also, when one of their oligarchs does dip his wick into the situation, so to speak, his way of aiding the country, instead of just giving the government the money to pay the regular army, is to create his own private army. Now, let's say Ukraine win this war in the next 3 weeks. What's he going to do with the private army then? You think they're all just going to go home? I mean, back to unemployment somewhere in West Ukraine, up the top of a mountain, with their goat? I mean, I don't think it's likely. And another thing as well, I'm not anti-Ukrainian, by the way. I like Ukraine. But a simple fact about it is that this country is staggeringly poor in a way that none of us here can comprehend. We don't live in that situation. The average salary is 170 euros a month. That's about $210. Can anybody here imagine what it's like to live on $210 a month? And that is the average. Some people are living on $50 or $60 a month. I mean, the poorest state in the USA is Louisiana, and the average wage in Louisiana is probably, I'm guessing, somewhere around $2,000 a month or something. It's still 10 times Ukraine's. The average salary here in Ireland is about $4,000 a month, or maybe $5,000, I'm not sure exactly. So one of the problems is these guys, these soldiers, how are they going to be reintegrated, because in a conscription system, back into this low-paid work in predominantly Western Ukraine?
You mean there's not a lot of jobs paying $10,000 bonuses for grabbing some schmuck off the street?
No, there's not. And another thing as well, last point, and I want to let other people speak because I'm kind of dominating it a bit. One thing about it is that I've got a friend actually she's in Dubai at the moment, but she's from Uzhgorod, which is in the southwestern part. It's actually a Hungarian region. Ethnic Hungarians are in the majority there. Her managed to get out of conscription this week because his uncle in Russia, ironically, by the way, his uncle lives in St. Petersburg, his uncle sent him 5,000 bucks and he just paid off somebody and got out of it. I mean, so we're talking about this new Ukraine, this Ukraine that is changing away from this corruption system. But it's obviously still going on at local level if somebody can buy their way out of the army. Now, I know this happens in other countries, but $5,000 is not a lot of money to buy someone out of the army. I mean, you would be lucky to buy a second-hand 10-year-old Toyota for that, So that's all I've got to say for the moment. Any further questions? Fine.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. All right, so guys, let's pivot towards Iraq for a moment.
No, I want to hear the guy's opinions on Ukraine.
Guys, do you have comments on Ukraine?
Do we even know what's in the convoy?
Yeah, British journalists, the guy Steve Rosenberg from the BBC, and Roland Oliphant of the Daily Telegraph, they were allowed to freely look in the lorries. Basically, they said buckwheat, which is a kind of Russian rice, if you like. Okay, it's the best way to describe it. Buckwheat, sort of, not literally grain, powdered milk, baby food,
sleeping bags, I heard.
Sleeping bags, yeah, some clothing items, baby clothes, nothing that could be used for military purposes. Now, Jack said initially it wasn't a Trojan horse. It's obviously not a Trojan horse going in, but it may be a Trojan horse going out. I mean, lots of empty lorries to put people in to bring them back to Russia, you know, to get them out of the war zone. Perhaps.
That is a very interesting. Send in a bunch of rice and bring out people you want.
Possibly, I mean, you know, possibly. If Putin has decided that the rebels are going to lose, yeah.
So, given my background and given both personally and educationally, I mean, a lot of what you said was, you know, was spot on. I mean, Russia is poor. It is mainly an agrarian culture. It is the breadbasket. It was the breadbasket of Eastern Europe, specifically of Russia, and the Ukrainians harbor huge resentments against Russia for the way they were treated during the Soviet and Tsarist days, where basically the Ukraine was, you know, in a sense, had the Jim Crow laws of the Soviet Union. It was very hard for them to aspire politically. I mean, when you had a Georgian go over Ukrainian, I mean, really, folks?
Could I just say as well, though, that Khrushchev was Ukrainian, and so was Brezhnev. I mean, come on, in fairness.
You know, that's true. Khrushchev was, and he was reviled, although Brezhnev wasn't as much. I didn't remember.
Brezhnev was from Donetsk. He was from Donbass, where the war is going on at the moment.
Right, but he considered himself ethnically Russian, not ethnically Ukrainian.
But he was Ukrainian. I mean, Brezhnev's a Ukrainian name. I mean, you know, his parents were Ukrainian.
Yeah, but he considered himself ethnically Russian. I mean, that's how it was. One of the jokes.
Political expediency. Stalin.
No. It was sort of like it's sort of like when there were Jews who would convert for expediency. That was kind of how he saw himself.
When the bad shit was going down in Ukraine, if you use my language, which was primarily in the 1930s, the three guys who were running the Soviet Communist Party at the time were Stalin, Beria, and Khrushchev, two Georgians and a Ukrainian.
Georgians. I will just, you know, as I said, the Ukrainians did not like the fact that they were losing the Ukrainian heritage. They felt that they were trying to be, you know, be subservient. I'd forgotten Khrushchev, to be honest with you, as a Ukrainian. That's true, although he's much loved. And you know, and let's face it. I mean, the Ukrainian political system has been sort of like since they've separated from Russia, has been like a third world nation, right? I mean, they've had political fights in their version of parliament. They've had all sorts of riots, and they're still trying. I mean, Ukraine, for all intents and purposes, is still trying to get footing. Now they have somebody that they can unite against. I sort of hate to use this analogy, but it's, yeah, Russia came in. Russia needs their warm water port. Russia needs some of the resources that exist in the Ukraine. But the Ukrainian government, which has been a banana court for a while, now has something that everybody's united against, sort of like when the Argentinians attacked the Falkland Islands.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's my opinion, right, wrong, or indifferent, but...
All right.
Okay.
Hold on, guys. Hold on. I do want to shift topics a little bit here because I want to touch on a couple of other topics that have nothing to do with Europe. One of them directly, and that's Ebola. Okay. It is now popping up in what we will call interface locations in the world, right? So, or fears of it. Let me rephrase that. Fears of it. So there are people being in Spain that are arriving at a Spain hospital, and it turns out they just made it, and you know they've only been in the nation for 3 days. They're sick. They're being tested. These type of events are starting to pop up everywhere. The biggest story today was an attack on a center that was taking care of people, and they took off with a whole bunch of supposedly bloody mattresses, sheets, and other things. And the obvious quick implications was that someone has decided to weaponize Ebola. Do we, as a society, believe that we have in place today the capacity to deal with a weaponization of Ebola? And the reason I bring this up is all we have to do is now look at what's happening in Ferguson with racial riot events, and you can say very quickly that there is a lot of tension under the surface, whether it's in the U.S., whether it's in Europe, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's in Asia, right? There's a lot of tension in society. Is the world ready for a real event? And I guess that's kind of what the macro tourism hour is supposed to be about at times, is looking at these events and asking, could this event become a real one? Could this become, like when Fukushima, as I call it, happened, right? That changed. That's a real event. And we're still having implications. Please, Jim.
You can't weaponize Ebola in the same fashion that you can weaponize something like anthrax. You can't. It doesn't. You can't make the particle small and spread it out over the air. You got to touch the stuff. You got to get a contact with the body. People who are getting Ebola are washing the dead bodies or touching the dead bodies because that's the way they do things over there. I don't think it has the same potential to be weaponized in that sense. It could be you could send a infected person to various places.
I'm thinking of suicide bombers that are infected.
Again, you really have to. You could, if the person said, "Okay, I have," or you could identify a person with Ebola. Don't touch them. You're fine. You know, they can't sneeze at you. They can't spit at you. You really need to be touching the body, and I'm not certain that that's possible. I mean, it is. I mean, obviously, any disease that goes that way. If it was that easy to move it around, they would have epidemics that would number in the tens of thousands or millions rather than 1,800 people who have it now, even in areas as remote as Liberia and places like that.
All right. No arguments. I'm just putting out questions. Next one. In the case of ISIS and the events that are going on in Iraq, is the U.S. going to find itself in a scenario where it's having to bomb near Baghdad to protect Baghdad? That's the kind of scenario I'm asking.
I don't think that's in the short term offing. There has been a lot of talk recently. You know, it's also notable that the Fred Flintstone of Iraq did give up the reins to power, or any of his arguments to power. That is Maliki, who I've heard, and I discussed this online quite a bit. But I learned that he's now worth $2 billion. This guy, you know, had shekels in his pocket. Actually, one of the interesting stories was a local Iraqi tailor who used to make suits for Mr. Maliki until about 2 years ago, and now he's getting them made in Italy. I don't know who is going to win the Maliki Olympics to get him to come stay in their country. Word was that he was going to go to Syria next, but that is clearly not going to happen, given the atmosphere in Syria. But getting back to your question, Jack, I don't think, at least in the near term, that's going to happen. But it is quite clear to me that the Obama administration was withholding full-fledged support or activity in Iraq until such time as Maliki moved on. That seems to have been, taken care of at this point.
All right. So, thoughts, gentlemen? Anyone else?
We don't want Mr. Maliki. Those are the kind of guys that show up here. We don't want him.
Well, unlike Ukraine, I don't have any friends hanging around in the Iraqi wilderness, so I don't have any kind of, insight.
I mean, Iraqi politics is sort of like Chicago politics. Okay, I mean, I'm sorry. This is, let's be honest here. You know, you have one set of thieving thugs, and you're just going to replace them with another set of thieving thugs. I mean, we sort, our political system at least has the veneer of genteelness, and we have people who will actually go after ethics violations up to a point. I mean, there it's just, you know, you go in, you do as much graft as much as possible, and you go forward. So I mean, it's just, I mean, we're changing one thieving thug for another one.
Okay, can I
Sure.
put in here and ask you guys as Americans? Until a few months ago, am I right to say that the United States of America, the world's leader in freedom and democracy and blah, 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 was supporting ISIS against Bashar Assad, and 1 year ago wanted to invade Syria in support of, well, airstrike Syria, in support of ISIS, despite President Putin's objections. Now, what has happened in the last 2 or 3 months that they're not talking about getting rid of Assad anymore? Like, just explain this, guys, please.
You know, it's just shifting priorities. I mean, let's face it. Who remembers during Reagan's time? Whoa, dude! Who remembers during Reagan's time when the United States was funding the Afghan rebels, which turned into the Taliban?
He was Polish. He was Polish. His name was Jigibiwushki or something. I don't know. What's his name? A Polish dude that used to work with Carter.
Brzezinski.
Yeah, that's right. I call him Jini Biggie Wushki or something. Anyway, but that guy is now half.
Well, I mean, Brian, you raise a point that's very true. I don't know that the U.S. ever committed. The administration did not commit to such a strategy, although it was clearly the advice of the primary leaders, that is the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Director of National Security, within the Obama administration to go forward and partner with ISIS in Syria to support them. Now, there is no doubt, and in fact, it's whispered about, there have been some reports out that there was clandestine money and funding that went to training and supporting ISIS in Syria. In fact, I sent to you a little message in our side blurb that John McCain, there's actually pictures of him with various ISA personnel that he strongly supported. What happened here was Obama had a late second kind of doubt, I guess, regarding moving forward.
Given to him by Putin. If Putin hadn't objected, he would have gone ahead and done the airstrike.
I don't know that that's the case. That was an aspect of it, but really it was driven by internal politics here in the U.S. And that's why he decided. That's why Obama decided, pretty much on his own, based on every account that's out there, to put it to Congress. And Congress, he knew, wouldn't act because they couldn't get anything together.
I have a question about regime change, okay? In the last couple of years, okay, the last decade, right? I love democracy, by the way. I think it's fantastic, okay? I think it's a wonderful idea. But democracy is suitable for my culture in Ireland. It's suitable for American culture. It's suitable maybe for French, British, blah, blah. But
I don't know about the French. I want to go on record there, but go ahead.
Whatever. Yeah, so anyway, look, the point is, though, right, that in the last 10 years, you've gotten rid of Saddam Hussein. Okay, he was an awful person, of course, but you've gotten rid of him. And look what's happened. You got rid of Gaddafi, look what's happened. You got rid of the guy in Egypt, Mubarak, look what's happened, right? You got rid of the guy in Ukraine, look what's happened, okay? The point is, like, you wanted to get rid of Assad last year. Is it not fair to say that, yes, Assad is a very, very bad man, but the guys who would have taken over from Assad are 100,000 times worse than him? It's not like replacing, Hitler with Gandhi. It's kind of like replacing Hitler with Mao Zedong.
Well, I mean, to your point, Brian, you're absolutely right, and this is the foolishness of the American administration, and it goes back beyond the current one, but to the last one as well. George Bush was going to bring democracy to the Middle East, like it was going to be some huge wave change. And I think your point is extraordinarily well taken and exactly spot on. I think it's pure arrogance on the part of the American administrations. I think it's idiocy.
It sounds like the USSR spreading communism back in the day, doesn't it? Our ideology is right and everybody else's is wrong. No?
Well, we've been doing that for forever. Everybody does that.
Yeah, but
That's the way ideas are spread on this planet. We think our ideas are right. Let's push them on the weaker guys.
But actually, during the Soviet Union's time on the world stage, America supported many dictatorships, including Iraq and Saudi Arabia, which it still does, oddly enough, you know, on the basis that it was better the devil we know than the devil we don't know, in case they were all going to turn into commies. In some respects, I wonder...
Iran didn't turn out that well for us on that one.
No,
We did a regime change in Iran, and then that kind of unwound.
Well, some 20 years later, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, well, wait a minute. We did the regime change in '56, and the guy was out of there by what, 70s?
70.
I mean, that 20 years. I mean, the Shah wasn't there long.
No, he was there. He was there 20 years.
All right.
He stole more money than anybody in Ukraine managed, I think, in those 20 years. Yeah.
He was just better at it.
He won. I think he won the Epsom Derby, actually, which is quite an achievement.
Did you guys see? Supposedly, it looks like an announcement by Saudi Arabia saying that they're ready to improve ties with Iran, based on, and they gave two reasons or two things, but it was like something that I didn't expect to see, even as a flag of let's talk. Saudi and Iran. What's going on in the Middle East that isn't being articulated, I guess, is a better way of putting it.
Oh, I've got a couple things. First off, one of probably the major funder of ISIS is Saudi Arabia.
Yes, I agree with that statement.
The Saudis and the Israelis came together some time ago in absolute frustration with the Obama administration and said, you know, this can't last. This is unacceptable. And they have made deals. I mean, you know, the big non-secret of the geopolitical world is the closeness of Saudi Arabia with Israel. But of course, I think, in my view, is that ISIS has kind of gone off the rails here a little bit. That they're, you know, typical organization. You set up, you kind of build up, you throw some money at it, and then they rob that bank and supposedly got all types of gold bullion and all types of cash. And, you know, now they're actually paying their troops. Not just feeding them, paying them.
They're issuing passports now. Have you seen the passports?
I saw that.
Wow.
Yep.
What?
Are they biometric?
What do you have to do to get an ISIS passport?
I saw one on the internet. They're issuing ISIS passports. They're also in Mosul.
That might have been a fake.
All right.
Yeah.
No. Oh, hold on. I'm actually under the impression that they're attempting to start issuing their own. Not that anyone will accept them.
Right. I mean, but they were legit, Jim. I mean, legit. You know, I say with quotation marks around it, that they are actually trying to issue them. I mean, it's insanity.
Who's issuing them? Out of where are they being printed?
The passport of...
Yeah, passport
also.
Yeah.
Passport.com. I don't know.
I mean, Jim, to your point, it raises a very interesting concern, or a very interesting point here relative to ISIS, and that is their media sophistication is at such a high level, far in excess of whatever we've seen with any, like, a rising body. Their media sophistication and the way they kind of have pulled the levers is quite interesting. I don't know exactly what's going on here, but there's clearly more to this story.
Yeah.
Sure, that's true.
All right,
Jim, can I make a point? Ask a question.
Jim and I have had to have a fight for a long time, and it's been itching, and we need to just get it started. The pause. Are we going to address the great pause?
Yeah, I mean, I'll address all that in basically one easy expression of how I feel about climate change, the pause, and anything regarding it. I'm not a climate scientist. I know, Jack, you're not a climate scientist.
We agree.
What it boils down to is who do you believe? And I'm not capable of analyzing the science to the degree necessary to make a really informed opinion. And I haven't done the meta-analysis to look at the overall, groups of opinions. But I think that if you analyze who is being represented by what, the oil companies are on one side, and people are saying the government is influencing the scientists in the, what is it, ICPP?
I understand what you're talking about.
Right. So, who do you think is most likely to be telling you the truth? And I'm going to go with the scientists, because I don't know that the government has ever been able to influence large numbers of scientists in the same way that oil companies have, because oil companies pay better.
All right. I tell you what. Let me put this argument on pause. We'll come back to this one between you and I. I actually want to have a conversation with you on the side, and we'll exchange some metadata before we pick this back up. So I'll take that as a fair statement.
Okay.
And then from there we can return to have a friendlier duel over the things we agree to disagree.
Okay.
So, all right, moving on from weather, just so you know, Brian, Jim and I have started this conversation like for a year and never really got to it. It would arrive at the end of each show, and we'd say we'd come to it next time. Yeah. So it was one of those, I wanted to get it on the table so he and I can return to it now later.
Who's winning? That's the question.
Well, no one on this one. Yeah, but he and I have had some other fun ones.
I'll go as far as to say I'm winning.
Oh, I haven't even responded yet.
Byron, it's sort of like watching Ren and Stimpy fight. It's amusing to watch, but nobody ever really wins.
Okay, so it's kind of like I was going to say something. I was going to say something you can't say in the United States. So
no,
go ahead.
Oh, by the way, there's no FCC rules here, so fuck you.
Not even in the United States.
I won't say it because we may have listeners who are not white Caucasians.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
All right, guys, race riots in America. Thoughts,
great.
Right?
Okay.
Race riots in America. Thoughts? Is this the start of one? Is this the start of a real one? Right?
No, I don't think it's the start of a real one. I think that the loudmouths, the Sharptons, and people like that will take it over, and it'll dissolve into inane nonsense. But I will say that it is alarming to me to see a bunch of unarmed people of any color standing in the streets and having a guy on top of an MRAP pointing a machine gun at American citizens. That bothers me. I find that to be really alarming. And whether or not, because I wasn't there, I don't know who shot what, and if the kid was a bad guy, a thug, a robber, or whatever, I really find the militarization of the police departments in the United States to be an alarming thing. I think that is the underlying thing here that is more concerning. I mean, there's race problems. White cops shooting black people is a bad thing, and it's happened too many times statistically to be non-existent. There's no question that it happens, and there's racism behind some of that stuff. But I wasn't on the scene for this one. But I was watching a guy with a machine gun pointing it at American civilians who were not armed. That's bad.
I agree with that.
I mean, I have been promoting, for those that follow my Twitter stream, a book that an author who I've been trying to get on this show for quite some time, who actually lives in the same town now that I live in. But he has he does a post he does a blog, in the Washington Post. His name is Radley Balco, and his book is The Rise of the Warrior Cop. It was published last, I think, July, but it's an excellent book that kind of chronicles the morphing of the police departments in the United States from, your quote-unquote Andy Griffith, Barney Fife types to this, kind of armed cotillion of knuckleheads. And I think they're totally out of control. The weapons program, that is the passing of ex-military gear to police departments began in the late 80s, but it significantly accelerated under both the Bush administration and the Obama administration. And
Hold on, Clinton. It goes back to Clinton.
Yeah, there's no doubt it goes back before that.
Right, think of the two guys who had the body armor who robbed the bank in L.A. and they did a running gun battle in L.A. where no police were actually killed, right? But there was a running gun battle where the police were going into gun stores, and saying, "Give us ammo, give us guns, give us guns, give us ammo," and they'd run out and shoot at these guys, two Samoans. So that was 92-ish.
Yeah, but I mean. It actually even goes back further than that, Jack. And I mean, if you want to look to the roots of it, it goes back to the battles that went on in South Florida over the drug trade, where all the money came in. But it has gotten far worse because there's so much extra war equipment available out there, and they thought this. Politicians thought this was a great idea. Just, hey, repurpose our troops.
Can I bring another point up, Bob?
Absolutely.
On that exactly. You have military surplus weapons being put into the hands of the local constabulary, and then who trains them to use it? The obvious answer to that question is the military trains the police to use these devices, and their jobs are totally different. The military's job is to kill people and break things, and the police department is there to protect and serve. So how does the guy who is there to break things and kill people train these protect and serve types in the use of these devices? And the answer is they don't. They train them in the way they know how to use them, and that again is a warrior cop, not a protect and serve Officer Joe Bolton on the that you tell your kid go to ask him for help. You don't go to ask the guy for help who's wearing a gas mask and riot gear. You just don't.
And just quickly, I like to first off, I absolutely concur with what you said there, Jim. The only thing I'd like to add is that training is very limited in terms of time, and these guys get this stuff on, and it is go time.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. All right, to Ireland.
To Ireland, yeah. A couple of questions from my friends across the Atlantic here. In this country, our police don't even carry guns.
Same here.
They're actually unarmed. Okay, there you go. Right now, we have people from all over the world here: black, white, whatever you want to call them, different races, right? The last riot I remember here was over ice cream, I think. I think the ice cream ran out of the van, in a field somewhere or something. That's about the height of it. And a couple of cops ran over and said, "Hey, now, boys, stop doing that," and that was about the height of it now. But
well, you just
the point I'm trying to make is, you're in the United States. You're very used to having different races and different times. Many Americans are mixed race. You have a black president for the first time ever. Can you see how this looks outside? Why are they fighting about race when they've got a black president? I mean, it's just like, what the hell is going on? It's a bit like, Germany electing a Turkish president or ethnic Turkish president, and the guy is down the kebab shop going nuts in, Wannsee in Berlin on Friday night. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And my last question is, why, at a time when America's trying to, last point is, Julia Yoff, who works for the New Republic magazine in America, and Miriam Elder, who works for BuzzFeed, they tweeted the other night, why is America turning into Russia dealing with protests? I tweeted back to Miss Yoff, and I said, Julichka, I said, can you give me an example of when in Russia, in modern Russia, a guy pointed a machine gun at a civilian on the street, or a sniper rifle, and she couldn't answer it back. So the point I'm trying to make to you is that even in the Bolsnaya protests in Moscow a couple of years ago, Putin did not send out snipers. He sent out rough special forces police to kind of rough people up, to grab them maybe in headlocks and throw them into paddy wagons. He did not send out military-grade equipment. What is going on in America that this is allowed to happen? My question, sorry.
A couple of things, and I'm gonna go through it in a couple different, because you asked.
I'm gonna mute myself.
What?
I'm gonna mute myself.
Yeah, you should. So there's a couple of things. First of all, the United States is a country that prides itself, correctly or incorrectly, and I'm not going to get into that debate, on the ability of its populace to have weapons. Okay, I mean, if you think about how the country developed, not like the other countries, but how the country developed as a armed citizens' resistance against the British.
So did our country. So did our country the very same way. Armed resistance against the British.
I know, but we've kept that, and Ireland sensibly got rid of it. Okay. Yeah.
And Israel started. By the way, Israel started the very same way.
I understand that, and Israel
you don't see the Israeli police pointing sniper rifles at Israel.
No, because the whining factor.
Citizens. They might do it to Palestinians, but not Israelis.
Well, so anyway, the point is that America is still very much a hunting nation. It's still very much a nation that loves its guns, for right or wrong, and the NRA is not someone to be trifled with politically. Trust me, I'm a big fan of sensible gun laws, which we don't have right at the moment. But what happens with the riots and what's happened, when we had them in Kent State in the 1960s, when we had them, going forward, is these things do have a. I don't know what Jack is saying, but the point is that. Yeah, he's on mute. Probably a good idea because he's about to explode on me. As I said, I'm the liberal of the group here.
He was eating tacos earlier. He needs to go to the toilet, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but the thing is that we've had this. We've had this for a lot of times, and and what I find most objectionable is not. I do think it's objectionable that somebody holds a machine gun at a protester. But where I find it most objectionable is the asymmetry of how these forces are applied. So yes, we have a black president, and the minute we had a black president, we had a group of people who hated him. Some claim politically, but some, because what's wrong with it's just wrong to have a black president. They'll never, they don't admit that, but when you start hearing some of the things coming out of some of these other people's mouths, if someone of a different race had said that about George Bush, the person would have been locked up in Gitmo. From my perspective, now, do I think these particular riots are going to lead to some social change? No. What's going to happen is the anger is going to run out. Okay, it's not big enough. You can only keep the anger for so long because it requires a tremendous amount of energy to stay angry, to stay that forward. At some point, it gets old, and you move on. You deal with, you have a police investigation, you roast the guy, he takes the fall on the sword, and you move on. I do agree with you. We do have this culture of, of everybody being overly armed. Not very comfortable for me or for other people. I don't have a gun in my house, for instance. When I was in Israel, all the soldiers had guns, but they were, the magazines were always on the side, but they could use them whenever they needed to. So,
but the people don't have guns.
But the other piece of this is that there is sort of this undercurrent. I mean, yes, we're this big pot that has a lot of different races, but there's still quite a bit of xenophobia, where you're not really my type of American, right? Jack isn't really my type, and I'm using him as an example, but, even in the neighborhood I grew up in, right? I grew up in a Jewish-Italian neighborhood. We had some Greeks in our neighborhood. Were we friendly to them? Yeah, everything was quiet, but they weren't part of the clique, and they were always kind of kept off to the side. So, is it the right thing? No. And the other thing to keep in mind about the United States is we're really not as united as everybody says we are. We're really still kind of 50 different countries that sort of get along. The Federalists be damned.
I was in Virginia in 2008 before Obama got elected,
What part of Virginia? What part of Virginia?
I was in Roanoke for this particular episode, okay, which is over near the Appalachian kind of end of things. I was in a diner. I was seeing a girl at the time from that area, but I was living in London at the time. And anyway, I was over in this, a place in this bar. It's a bar. I mean, it's a dive bar. And I just asked the two guys beside me, who are you going to vote for in the election? And one of them said, I'm voting for the N word, okay? And I said, but why are you calling him that and then saying you're going to vote for him? And he goes, he's very good and I like him, but he's still an N-word. I mean, I found that really disturbing, to be honest with you. And that's just proves your point about, some people, splitting into groups. And like, last point as well, I remember being in Boston once upon a time, and I swear to God, like, I actually felt ill leaving. I felt like, Boston was kind of, a Disneyland version of Dublin. It's kind of like,
Oh, come on, you didn't hang out in the right Irish neighborhoods, clearly.
It was like Dublin with Disneyland. I mean, it was kind of like, and I got really tired of it. I'm Irish, I'm Irish, I'm Irish, I'm Irish. And Jesus Christ Almighty, stop people, But yeah, I mean, you get a bit in California as well. Or you get, what I love in California is, I'm 1/4 Irish, 1/4 Jewish, 1/4 Italian, and 1/4 Ukrainian, for example.
Hey, that's me, but different formula. But yes.
I'm still waiting for you to wear your yarmulke, Jack.
So could somebody quickly explain, perhaps I'm thinking the man to explain it might be Jim, because he deserves a chance to speak. Why is this latent racism not been at least parked during Obama's presidency? I'm not saying it should disappear, but it could be parked,
I don't know that it's changed any at all. I think there's been latent and overt racism forever. I'm hoping, and again, I'm outside the country. I'm not paying as close attention. Where I live, racism is such a non-issue. It's not funny. But there's always going to be the America is so bifurcated on so many levels. Everybody is so diametrically opposed on everything that unless you're exactly the same as your neighbor, there's going to be this discomfiture, and it doesn't go away easy. And the attitudes of the media, the attitudes of the populace, and the attitudes of the politicians just reinforce it.
Okay, I've sorted out the problem once and for all. From what Jim just said, I've sorted this out, okay? The Cayman Islands is a place where nobody pays any tax, and the climate is obviously wonderful, okay? So if the United States moves everybody into Florida and abolishes tax, is that the way forward, Jim?
I don't know that I want all those people that close to us here.
I might drop in and visit.
Yeah, I come, certainly, Jack, come visit. There's a room here for you always. But yeah, I don't know that that's the answer. I think if you put all of the Americans in a really close, physical proximity, they'd kill each other off to about 50 guys, and then that would be it.
I know somebody in Moscow who would love such an outcome.
Yeah. So on that note, on that bombshell, to use the BBC's exit strategy, on that bombshell, this has been the Macro Tourist Hour. My name's Jack. This is the Round Table. This group will return next week, or pieces of it. These gentlemen are always invited to return. Once you've been on the show, you are always a member of the Round Table. So
I want to go on with the War Room guys. Where are the War Room guys? I expect them to drop in.
The War Room guys. I will try to get at least one of them on air and see if we can't have a show where I just mute myself and watch.
I'm going to practice with a really angry Jack Russell before I go on. Okay.
It was nice meeting you, Brian. Byron.
Jim.
Hey, Jim, guys, we're going to end the show. Stay in the green room, but we'll chat for a few moments afterwards. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this hour. We'll be back next hour. We have new shows scheduled that'll be starting to roll out in early September, late August. The 20th, we'll have a new show. So look for that in a couple of days. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.
May